There is a kind of power that doesn't ask to be noticed, but somehow it always is. Power that makes him pause without knowing why, that lingers in his thoughts long after the moment has passed, that shifts the dynamic without a single word spoken. This isn't about beauty, effort, or trying harder. This is about a feminine power so rooted, so self-contained, that once it appears, it cannot be ignored, no matter how much he tries. There is a kind of feminine power that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't chase attention, demand validation, or compete for dominance. And yet, it is impossible to overlook. This is the power that makes him pause mid-thought, that lingers in his mind long after the moment has passed, that quietly unsettles him because it cannot be controlled or easily understood. It is not loud, it is not aggressive, it is rooted. And once awakened, it changes the entire dynamic without you having to say a single word. This feminine power doesn't come from trying to be chosen. It comes from knowing yourself so deeply that you stop negotiating your worth. When a woman reaches this state, her presence shifts. She no longer bends to be appealing or shrinks to be accepted. She moves with an internal authority that cannot be mimicked. And that is precisely why he can't ignore it, because it doesn't seek his approval, yet it commands his attention. Men are conditioned to respond to effort, pursuit, and reaction. But this kind of feminine power operates on a different frequency. It creates impact through stillness, through discernment, through the quiet certainty of a woman who is no longer trying to prove anything. This is the moment when attraction stops being about appearance or words and starts becoming about energy. What makes this power so magnetic is that it is self-contained. It doesn't need him to complete it. It doesn't orbit around his moods, his consistency, or his decisions. Instead, it stands on its own. And when a man encounters a woman who is emotionally grounded and internally fulfilled, something in him responds instinctively, not because she is trying to impress, but because she is no longer available to be drained. This is where many misunderstand feminine power. They assume it's about seduction, manipulation, or strategy. But true feminine power doesn't manipulate it. It reveals where he is insecure, where he lacks depth, where he is used to control instead of connection, and that revelation alone makes her unforgettable. A woman in her power is not reactive. She doesn't rush to explain herself or justify her boundaries. She doesn't beg for clarity or overextend for reassurance. She observes. She chooses. And that calm selectiveness creates tension, not anxiety, but intrigue, because he realizes that access to her is no longer automatic. This power grows the moment a woman stops centering her emotional world around how she is perceived. When she stops asking if she is enough for him and starts asking whether something is aligned with her, the balance shifts. He feels it. Even if he can't name it, he senses that something has changed, and the change commands respect. Men are deeply affected by emotional consistency. When a woman's energy is stable, when her mood is not easily disrupted, when her self-worth doesn't fluctuate based on attention, she becomes a mirror. And what he sees in that mirror forces him to confront himself. That is why he can't ignore her presence, even in silence. This kind of feminine power is not performative. It doesn't seek to be seen as powerful. It simply is. It's in the way she listens without losing herself, in the way she walks away without drama, in the way she holds her standards without hostility. And these quiet choices accumulate into something undeniable. There is also a deep sense of mystery attached to a woman in her power, not because she is withholding, but because she is whole. She doesn't overshare to feel close. She doesn't expose her vulnerabilities to be validated. She reveals herself selectively, intentionally. That discernment creates depth, and depth is what holds attention long after surface attraction fades. When a woman embodies this energy, she changes the rules of engagement. He can no longer rely on charm alone. He can no longer test boundaries without consequence. He can no longer take presence for granted. Something in him becomes more alert, more focused, because he knows that this is not a woman who will remain available at the cost of herself. This is where fascination begins. Not obsession, but respect-driven attention. The kind that makes him notice her absence more than her presence. The kind that makes him reflect, recalibrate, and sometimes even rise to meet her level, or retreat if he cannot. The feminine power he can't ignore is not something you create, it's something you uncover. It emerges when you stop abandoning yourself, when you stop performing for love, when you choose alignment over attachment. And once this power is activated, it speaks louder than effort ever could. He may not understand it, he may not know how to handle it, but he will feel it, and he will never forget it. Feminine power begins forming the moment a woman stops outsourcing her sense of self, when her confidence no longer depends on how desired she is, how chosen she feels, or how consistent someone else is with her. Something fundamental shifts. She stops scanning for approval and starts listening inward. This inward orientation creates a steadiness that others can feel immediately. This power grows through emotional self-responsibility. She no longer expects someone else to regulate her emotions, rescue her from discomfort, or provide meaning to her life. She allows herself to feel fully, process honestly, and respond intentionally. This grounding makes her presence magnetic because it feels contained, self-aware, and secure. Discernment sharpens this power. Not every connection deserves access. Not every emotion deserves expression. Not every attraction deserves pursuit. When she pauses instead of reacts, observes instead of chases, her energy becomes refined. It signals that she is unavailable for confusion, inconsistency, or emotional chaos. Her relationship with solitude strengthens her power. When she no longer fears being alone, she stops settling. Solitude teaches her wholeness, and wholeness changes how men perceive her, because she is no longer driven by need, but by choice. She honors her boundaries without apology. She enforces them quietly through action. She leaves when something is misaligned. She withholds access when respect is missing. This consistency builds an energetic boundary others instinctively recognize. Self-trust anchors this power. She believes what she feels. She stops gaslighting herself to maintain connection. She listens to patterns instead of promises. This alignment is felt as confidence even when nothing is said. As she releases people-pleasing and overgiving, she reclaims energy. That energy consolidates into presence, clarity, and power. Feminine power cannot be rushed or performed. It is the byproduct of choosing self-respect over instant connection and tolerating temporary loneliness instead of long-term misalignment. She understands polarity. She allows space. She doesn't over-pursue or over-explain. Interest is allowed to rise naturally. This restraint is not manipulation. It is self-regulation. And self-regulation creates intrigue. She is open but not exposed, warm but not porous, engaged but unattached to outcome. This balance creates emotional tension that keeps him thinking, not because she created anxiety, but because she didn't. Ironically, when she stops trying to be unforgettable, she becomes unforgettable, because she is no longer performing, she is simply herself. Feminine power weakens the moment she abandons herself to preserve connection. Through over-explaining, accepting inconsistency, minimizing discomfort. Over time, these small compromises drain her presence. Emotional overexposure erodes depth. Chasing clarity instead of observing behavior gives power away. Overinvestment collapses polarity. Negotiable boundaries dissolve standards. Compassion without self-respect becomes self-erasure. Comparison disconnects her from her uniqueness. Control replaces trust. Ignoring intuition fractures alignment. Performing for love disconnects her from her core. Feminine power is not taken, it is surrendered, and the moment she returns to herself, through boundaries, discernment, and self-trust, it is restored. She protects this power through standards, not walls, through emotional consistency with herself, through living boundaries instead of explaining them, through restraint, self-devotion, and self-loyalty. When she lives this way, his behavior changes. He becomes more attentive, more deliberate, more reflective. Her calm removes chaos, her steadiness removes leverage, her presence filters men, inviting growth in some and distance in others. But the deepest transformation is not in him, it is in her. She becomes peaceful, grounded, clear. She no longer pours energy into confusion. She trusts herself. She releases attachment to outcome. Her standards rise. Her compassion deepens without self-betrayal. She comes home to herself. Attraction becomes a byproduct. Respect becomes the standard. Freedom replaces confusion. And this is the truth. The feminine power he can't ignore has nothing to do with him at all. It is the power of a woman who chose herself, protected her energy, trusted her intuition, and refused to abandon her truth. And once she lives from that place, she is no longer trying to be unforgettable. She simply is.